Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third ITCA Bootcamp with the help of us here at Box Office Pro. Thanks so much for ICTA for coming on to share some info with this session. Just running through the same things that we've said before in the previous sessions. This is we have a questions tab here at the top where please pop in your questions there. People will be answering them as we go through the process. And we also will have a short Q&A session at the end of this call as well. Even if you don't have any questions, please do go into that tab, and you have the ability to upvote any questions that you particularly want to know the answers to. So let me get out of here and let us get to the main business here. I'm proud and happy to introduce Frank Tees, who is moderating today's panel. You may note that he is not Beth Figge, who was supposed to be moderating this panel, but she's not feeling well, and we're very happy to have Frank, the Vice President of the ICTA, and also of Moving Image Technologies here as well. So Frank, take it away.
Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for joining today. And I'm not Beth, but Beth is getting better, and hopefully she'll be well soon. So let's see, I get to drive today, so I'm going to bounce through a few slides here. And excuse me, here we go. Thank you. So what is the ICTA, real quick, before we get going? Because today we're going to be starting on the cinema redesign in the COVID-19 aftermath. What are we going to do with our theaters? What are we going to make? How are we going to make changes? And what does the future look like going forward? First of all, what is the ICTA? The ICTA, International Cinema Technology Association, is a global network of professionals in the motion picture industry. And members of the ICTA are those professionals and companies that manufacture, service, create, sell, and use the equipment that goes into movie theaters. For more information or to join, go to icta-web.com. And everybody in our family, all the members of the ICTA consider you, all of our partners in cinema, exhibition, content, service, manufacturing, innovation, and support, not only our friends, but our family. And we're all here for each other during this intermission in our business and personal lives, and we eagerly hope to support you and to see you all as the curtain rises again in your theaters, at trade shows, in person, at the bar, coming soon. So the COVID-19 pandemic has transformed our day-to-day lives as we know them, and it has everyone has been personally affected. And we're mindful that the weeks and months ahead will continue to present major challenges to the entire motion picture industry. And we're now at the next juncture during this crisis when theaters worldwide are beginning to open. There are a lot of guidelines that need to be followed in each territory, and the norm will be different than in the past. But together we will succeed. Our industry will come out of this stronger, more successful than ever before. And it is our hope that we can help you, our cinema partners, navigate these changes, guidelines, and new restrictions. Our previous Reboot Camp focused on new products and technologies, or products and technologies that are new to us that have manifested themselves during the crisis. Our panel of experts went through sanitation, thermal management, barriers, guards, PPE, and we discussed seating occupancy technologies and software that are available to help you in your operation of your theater and to meet criteria for opening and remaining safe for your patrons. And you can find this webinar on our website, icta-web.com. Today, it's our intent to talk about how cinemas may need to be redesigned moving forward in the COVID-19 aftermath. Whether it's a new build or a retrofit, we'll need to make changes to accommodate the new restrictions or guidelines put in place or to lessen the impact of our business. This includes, but not limited to, MEP, FF&E, and the cost implications for these new considerations. So with that in mind, please, with us today to help steer us through this new territory are a panel of architecture experts known to many of us as the best in the biz. We are honored to have such an esteemed panel assembled today to offer insights and recommendations when we consider the changes our theaters may see. Even though these gentlemen need no introduction, allow me to present our panel in alphabetical order. First, we have Mike Cummings from TK Architects. And Mike is a graduate of Kansas University and has been with TK Architects for decades now. He's currently the senior principal at the firm and is worked almost exclusively with the cinema industry for over 35 years. We have Domenico Del Priore, who's a director at Deca Design, and Domenico is a graduate from Mackintosh School of Architecture in Scotland, and he built his first cinema in Singapore back in the mid-90s for a Village Roadshow. He has an association with cinema design. He's been associated with cinema design ever since. And he was brought back to Europe by Warner Brothers to head their design and development program in Italy for Warner Village. Marcus Howell is Chief Business Officer with Dialectic Engineering, and which is an employee-owned mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design (MEP) design firm headquartered in Kansas City that serves clients nationwide. And Marcus is also a graduate, is a graduate of Kansas State University. Let's see, Mike Veckley. And we put that in there on purpose so you can pronounce that correctly, because I always get it wrong. Mike Veckley is an architect and partner at the award-winning design firm 5G Studio Collaborative and Ink and Oro Interiors, both based in Dallas. Mike has over 20 years of experience designing and consulting with cinemas for many of the nation's leading exhibitors. Let's see. So, a quick note before we start. Please research the products, ideas, and suggestions discussed here before you purchase to ensure that they will adequately serve your needs and meet your local requirements for reopening. The panel will be available to answer your questions, and contact information will be provided at the end of the webinar. All right, so we're going to go discuss permanent design changes. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to lend your expertise to the industry. So, permanent design changes. The pandemic has made us all rethink how we gather and socialize and do business, and theater's been very hard hit as they not only provide entertainment, but it's a gathering place for socializing and even eating. So, I'm going to are you getting requests to change the way theaters are designed to be more prepared during the pandemic and to be prepared in the future? And let's see, Marcus, you're a top center, so I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, we have. We've actually had some clients reach out to us to look at some new mechanical systems or way to design new systems, or way to put maybe some new filtration, UV possibly. And we've been exploring that, actually from the start of the pandemic, when everything started to go down, everybody started to get shut down. So we definitely have been engaged and have gotten pretty far along on coming up with some ideas. But yeah, it's a big topic.
Yeah. Mike Cummings.
Yes, hi Frank. Yeah, so we're thinking about these things all the time. Our clients are also trying to focus on being able to reopen their businesses, and there's a lot of things that go along with that. But we're constantly thinking about what changes might be brought about, from how people move through the building and interact with food and beverage, and of course in the auditorium, as well as mundane things like restrooms and materials that might be incorporated in response to COVID.
And Mike Veckley?
Yeah, I think, the key word that I think you mentioned in your question was permanent. I think, we're being asked to look at a lot of studies of things that might change and what that might have as far as an impact on the way the theaters lay out, the way the seating is laid out. But the permanency of those changes, I think, is yet to be seen, just with everything that is changing on a daily basis. Masks didn't work, masks work, social distancing. So I think there's a lot of studies going on right now to try to figure out what might have to be implemented in the long run. But I think there's some hesitancy right now, at least with our clients, to make any permanent changes that might not be so permanent in the coming months.
Right. Domenico, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the things that we're looking at were kind of fashion that was moving through already. It was a current already coming through of lower occupancy and higher spend per person. So we've been looking at how we lay out things in a qualitative environment, and that is only beneficial as a kind of response to what's going on for the gearing of the business.
Right. So what do we expect to see as far as, some specific things? I know you guys mentioned, or some of you mentioned seat spacing and whatnot. I know, Mike, you mentioned that. Mike Cummings, are you seeing a seat spacing request, things to change within the traditional stadium cinema to space people out?
Yeah, Frank, as I said, we're exploring kind of those options. We have had a client who's got a project who's near to start construction that asked us to relook at seating in auditoriums and spacing, and kind of has a hybrid solution that's reconsidering jamming every seat into every little kind of nook and cranny corner that you can, which is the typical approach, to rethinking that and saying, well, maybe I don't need to put every seat everywhere, and maybe we can space them a little bit more, to drop the capacity to something that's more functional for me going forward, and perhaps more functional, more palatable to customers. That they might choose a location because it has a little bit more separation and privacy, for people sitting in there, compared to one where you're sitting tight and you're fighting for an armrest with somebody you don't know. Those kinds of issues.
Yeah, I've got to say that I'm thankful that we're not, the large stadium and arena industry, because it seems like those venues are notorious for cramming seats in there, and that's going to be a challenge for them when they come to reopen. We've been going just the opposite direction and spreading things out and doing luxury recliners and spacing like that. Is that going to be the biggest change we see, Domenico?
Yeah, I think so. I think within the European and Middle Eastern environment, I think in some ways we're quite at the forefront of these changes of real qualitative investments. We have a project in Dubai at the moment. It's 17 screens, but it's on. I know you guys will work in square feet. I'm sorry, I don't know if you've heard.
I can do the math.
But we've got a 17 screener on 17,000 square meters. So you can imagine the kind of the footprint of that, and the changes in the amount of space around that. Seating is all recliner, all luxury, and then it goes from there on up. And we're bringing back balconies into cinemas to in a PLF. So different types of separation and segregation that allow a PLF experience happen on different levels in different situations. So, I think there's quite a few new ideas that go along with that reshaping of screens. Yeah.
Mike, what do you think on that? Do you think we're going to be seeing anything, massively changing in cinemas based on this? Mike Beckley?
Well, forgive me for I wasn't able to hear Domenico's response, but as far as the permanency of the seats, I think it's a little ironic. Had this pandemic happened 5 or 6 years ago, one of the responses could have been, let's take the 36 to 42 inch risers and spread them out, and reduce your seats by half, but put in luxury recliners, and that might have solved the problem of social distancing. We did that when we did that before the pandemic, right? So now you're taking something that's already been social distanced, if you will, from what we had before, and we're having to expand that and even do that even more. And so we've even had some clients ask us to pull up those old plans and use that to make a case that we've already provided that social distancing that's required with the seating by going through this recliner conversion phase. I think that moving forward, it's going to be tough to spread seats more than they already are. I know we have POS and purchasing online systems that allow you to automatically keep a seat in between, but at some point, at 25 or 50% capacity, just isn't going to work. So I think once we see how this pandemic plays out, what the perception is of the public, what type of safety measures we can put in place from a cleaning standpoint. We all want to see everybody come back to these theaters and fill these seats. I have a hard time seeing spreading out these seats more than what they already are, but time will certainly tell.
Right, for sure. So that's a lot. Marcus, is there anything you have to add to that you're seeing as far as the design changes?
Yeah, I mean, we're being asked, for greater filtration. We have to take a look, especially in the existing theaters, how that's going to affect, the existing systems operating. So going to MERV 13 filters, possibly put in UVC banks. Those are the things that make people feel comfortable, as an overall good practice of generating healthy buildings. The only, I would say, unfortunate thing is that none of those things have been able to be fully tested and proven of stopping, COVID-19. They've had success on previous viruses and obviously are in play in hospitals and other arenas. But I think it's a general comfort level. I think some of this stuff is going to be able to use to make people feel comfortable about coming back.
Yeah, it's a challenge with a lot of those studies too, because they've been tested on coronavirus, but not necessarily this coronavirus. So it's
Correct.
yeah, so everybody's a little bit nervous to make the call. So, we all know concessions is where the money is for exhibitors. One of the greatest revenue boosting trends has been the dine-in concept. So, what's going to be the repercussions to food service in the cinemas? Gentlemen, we'll start with you, Domenico.
Well, that's a really interesting question in terms of, I think technologically, in terms of pre-sales, I think is really important to people in terms of getting rid of that queue time and taking it out of the equation. So everything that we can do up front in terms of communication and pre-sales is an important part of that, and allowing the operations team get a chance to get ahead of the business. I think pass-through from kitchen and the way that we design our kitchens is going to change quite a lot as well to, once again, reduce queue time. I mean, that's only beneficial anyway, because nobody wants to stand in a queue. So that's only beneficial. We're definitely doing a lot more in-seat sales and making sure that the experience in-seat and in-seat delivery works very well. We're looking at technology in terms of call buttons and how we get delivery to service in-seat. That's a strong interest of a few of our clients. So yeah, and then I think actually the foyer spaces themselves, how we actually arrange foyer spaces. We've seen a tradition where cinemas associated with food courts often have an outside space. So you have a break space and natural light and air and garden space associated. And that's been quite a trend in quite a few of our developments of recent years. So yeah, things are changing in terms of shape and type of service delivery.
Okay. Mike Cummings, what have you seen?
Well, I think, the issue of seating and all that is still up in the air, and I agree with Mike Beckall that we'll have to see how that shifts out to see what permanent changes might be. But you will see changes in food and beverage that I believe will be permanent. And just like I think you'll see changes in cleanliness and visibility of cleaning that will remain once we get past this pandemic. And so, the reliance on personal devices and apps for ordering, as opposed to person-to-person kind of ordering, I think will remain. Certainly nobody likes a queue, like Dominic said, and controlling that will be something that people will think about. How food is picked up certainly is a consideration. If you look at the F&B kind of groups have done, they're going to more contactless kind of pickup, whether it's serving from a tray or a platform, or your food being placed in some kind of a cubby or something that you're able to go pick up. I think also the visibility of the food preparation area, kind of like you also see in F&B where the open kitchen idea, you can see it's being prepared fresh and safely. Although that there might be glass enclosed or something so that it's separated and has that appearance. But right. I think you will see open kitchen, open preparation kind of areas.
We're definitely designing open kitchens at this point in time. It's been a whole drive to visualize that whole food process. and also with product lines, because the product line is changing for a higher spend per person. So when you're doing like mini burgers or other kind of small snack kind of stuff that are now very much taking place in the market, then people, like, if you've got a good operation and that's set up really, really nicely, then it's good to, it's only interesting to visualize it.
That's interesting. You think that a lot of the surface would want to be, cleaning or even less surfaces to manage as far as cleanliness. But I guess the visibility of seeing people go out there and sanitize is actually reassuring. So that's not going to necessarily go away anytime soon. So let's move on. What kind of changes to concession areas will be necessary? And we've kind of touched on a lot of that. Open areas but concessions is a little bit different than food service in the sense because there's been a lot of in auditorium food delivery, but the concession stand is still it's queue times, it's generally grab and go and stuff like that. That being said, is grab and go going to be completely gone? So Mike, what do you think? Mike Beckley.
Yeah, I don't know that grab and go will completely go away. I do think, how that space is utilized is going to be different. 10, 15 years ago, we had really large lobby spaces for people to queue in the lobby, prior to going into to auditoriums, and reserved seating, negated the need for those large lobbies. I think concessions might be the same. If you're trying to have people stand 6 feet apart for concessions, those are going to be some long lines. So I think going back to what Mike was saying, you're going to see a lot of pre-ordering happen, app-based ordering systems, pick up to go, even for items, popcorn, candy, things that are pre-packaged, something that could be put in a doggy bag or on a tray that you can just go and pick up and order in advance. I think that's something that was already happening and is happening. But I think you'll see more people move towards it.
I think breaking down of the order into multiple, not doing a large concession stand per se, but taking longer lead items off that concession stand and moving it to one side, creating stalls or carts or other types of solutions for a longer item. They're going to break down that service delivery. I think free flow as well will, also allows people to navigate it themselves, so they can feel comfortable within an area and pick up on that basis. So that's another strong element. So I see concessions areas as being as slightly breaking themselves down into their various functions and various product lines.
Okay, Marcus, a little bit of a spin on this would be, is the kitchen itself and that food prep area, from a mechanical or a standpoint, or just the engineering standpoint of MEP systems, is that going to be a big change in order to accommodate sanitization, or just the clean prep of food and so forth in those spaces? Or
we already have a pretty high ventilation rate in there already. Big exhaust fans usually for the grill areas. If you're doing a full kitchen, and they're pretty spread out. But as you continue to spread out that space to get more room for the workers, you won't be able to consolidate all those grill spaces and all that overhead, grease catching devices and costs. So, we could see some costs go up if we increase the footprint of the kitchen. And then there's a lot of manufacturers coming out with different, UV systems to protect some of those back of house areas.
Right.
So, and then in the concession area, there may be a way to where you're starting to separate systems out instead of just, big, large volume, areas of through one or two, HVAC systems. They might start breaking that out so they can accurately control those areas, especially with pressurization.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Oops. Oh, I thought I closed it. All right. So next one is, do you anticipate a trend towards smaller theaters? I know Domenico had mentioned that they're bringing back balconies, but I know a lot of people have been making these steps towards smaller theaters, and the thought is maybe that would avoid us having to shut down large capacity spaces. I'm gonna start off with Mike Beckley on that one.
Yeah, we've already seen the move towards smaller theaters in some areas of the country. mostly for special events, parties, streaming services, things like that. So I think you'll continue to see some of that. I find it hard to believe that you're going to see an industry that moves away though from premier large format movies. You know, I think the ability for us to still provide an experience that you can't get at home is going to be there. And once these movies come back out, I think you're going to see that. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for the smaller auditoriums. I think there is. I just don't see it as a game changer across the industry.
Okay. Mike Cummings, would you agree with that?
So yes and no. I mean, I think I agree with the premium large format, tentpole, superhero kind of movie model, while currently seeming to be broken, has a proven track record and works and will eventually return. But we've been advocating smaller, more kind of flexible, rooms or spaces, even if they're not completely auditoriums. And so whether that's for movies or whether that's for gaming or other kind of social events or other kinds of content, I think that could be a real additive feature to a modern movie theater entertainment center going forward. And so I think we will see some of that. I think we'll see some people willing to try that. But I don't know how soon that will happen, given the situation that all of our clients are in right now. I think they're just wanting to get their cash registers ringing again.
That's true.
For what we're going to do in the future.
For sure. I'll take it to you, Domenico. But I also want to bounce into it because we're kind of leading that way. What do we see? What changes do we see necessary for like the private event rooms and for birthday parties and corporate events, and what about bowling areas and other things? And I know, Domenico, you had mentioned theaters, balconies, and big, but you also mentioned very large cinemas out there. I know they're going to probably be making use of that space.
Large area, a low seat count. So that's hinting at a dramatic change in the industry. The 90s theater with 2,500 seats and 11 screens or something like that, I think is beginning to fade out, and it's changing. We're upgrading them. We're upgrading the experience. As Mike said, the PLF format and the reason to go to the cinema is to have an experience, and we have to be able to create that. So it has to be a really great quality environment. We're in a very competitive kind of like a space in terms of media. So, and especially with news, like the time between films coming out and going into home entertainment, I mean, we've got to provide something different. So, and qualitative. So there's definitely that there, but there's people in the smaller kind of screens looking for the private event, looking for the esports, designing screens with a multifunctional use. We've got a lot of requests to look at multifunction. We've got a lot of requests actually to look at seating from a flexible usage kind of point of view, because there's always a conundrum in terms of multi-usage and cinema seating. That's a real conundrum it's an interesting design challenge for people.
Right. Do you see any changes in the mechanics and engineering of these different spaces? Are we still looking at different, airflows and sanitization as far as the air conditioning systems go?
Yeah, we're seeing an increase in outside air. People want to see us bring in more outside air and treat that. As far as the bowling spaces and arcade areas, it seems that those are usually large volume areas, which is making people feel comfortable. And more sanitization is really what's going on. I mean, I've visited some bowling venues over the last few weeks, and the cleaning protocol is extremely high. So that seems to be what's making people comfortable. But as they start to return in mass, they're going to be asking more questions. So people are becoming a lot more educated on the air they're breathing and how these systems operate. So I think outside air is a big place where we're going to start. I mean, we've already started adjusting that. So I think that's where we're going to head first in those big volume areas.
So I suspect then that would mean also probably the appearance of a lot of outside air, so skylights and open ceilings and stuff like that. So, okay. Let's move on to the next topic, which is right down your alley, Marcus. So I'm going to start off with you. So, what is perceived as inadequate indoor air handling, filtration, and sanitization during this pandemic is preventing businesses without an outdoor element from reopening in some areas. So, what needs to be done to the current HVAC systems to improve their efficiency in a germophobic world? Marcus, I'm going to leave with you on that one.
I think a lot of it has to do with just the general maintenance. I think maintenance has fallen off as businesses boom and construction was really going gangbusters there for a while. People have forgotten about the maintenance element of their equipment. So they need to go through and make sure they're clean, filters are changed, and then start looking at updating the filtration. MERV 13 seems to be where everybody is headed. There are some studies out there that show that it's been able to catch it. Now, they haven't been able to catch anything live, which is great, to not see live viruses in air handlers. But they have been able to catch it with MERV 13. There's a lot of conversation about UV. So UVC has been proven, in the past to take care of viruses, but hasn't, like we've said, has not been proven with COVID-19 yet. The testing is just not there. To retrofit equipment or return air systems with UVC could be something that would be beneficial. But like I said, it's all for the healthy building. So get people feeling comfortable about it. It's a general good thing to maintain your equipment and make sure it's clean, and then communicate that to your clientele. But for the most part, people do take care of their stuff. It's just educating the people that it has been.
And can you take any system and just throw a MERV 13 filter in it?
No, you can't. You have to look at it. It adds some pressure drop in there,
right.
But that can be achieved. You can rebalance the system to do a better job with that small pressure drop, but it needs to be looked at. You can have problems with freezing coils or inadequate airflow in the system if you start putting in too much filtration that blocks that airflow. But it has a MERV 13 from an 8 to a 13 isn't that large of a pressure drop currently.
Okay. Mike Beckley, what do you think? Is there any? You want to touch that one at all?
Well, I think if the airline industry can convince everybody that flying in a vacuum tube at 40,000 feet is the cleanest air for indoor space, I think we can do it in the theater industry, Marcus. We just need your help.
Yeah,
that's a good point. No, that's a really good point. So I'm going to bounce to the next one because we've already kind of touched on it. So so we're the new systems out there. Are we going to start off with HEPA? Are we going to do MERV 11, 13? Is it going to just require a higher volume of airflow? And what is this going to do to affect efficiency? Are we going to just stick with the existing specifications for air conditioning and stuff like that? Mike Cummings, you want to jump on that one?
Sure, with deference to Marcus, of course. I think we probably will see some changes, primarily driven by thoughts about, customer impact and perception. And so, having units that have a higher rate of filtration, and if they incorporate a UVC kind of component to aid in that makes sense to me. The volume levels are all based on seat occupancy or the people in a room, the fresh air requirements. And so we're already, because we have a reduced number of people in the room, we're already kind of over providing on the minimum requirements for outside air. But I think there might be some more programmable way to deal with that to achieve the right kind of volumes that are not exactly done right now. So we will see, but I think that's one area you will see probably some permanent changes in as people figure out how we can better clean as a result of the pandemic.
Yeah, I remember, my wife and my mother and stuff like that always say, "Oh, it's so cold in the theater," and so I guess we have the ability to keep things cool in there, and the ability to have a sufficient airflow. It's going to be a challenge to see what the new requirements are. Dominic, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'm just thinking about, there's a little struggle there in terms of airflow and noise. and what baseline standards you're dealing with acoustically. So that's an interesting one. And then actually positioning of diffusers and taking out air is another one. I mean, the classic, I'd say, we get with M&E engineers that are not, of course, as experienced as is pushing air from below. And we've always said for economic reasons, that's a no-no. But of course, that in this point in time is something that is, people might think, okay, maybe we want to revisit the idea of taking things from below and pushing them up.
Yeah.
So
did you provide this photo? One of you guys provided this photo, and this kind of leads into what you were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's a new element or a new way of, well, and I guess it's not a new way of heating and cooling a theater. It used to be used to do that all the time back in the day. I remember the holes in the floor in the older theaters with the ventilation coming from underneath into. Is that a better way to do it, or is it the forced way? Where it's coming down from the top and returning to the top. Is that better?
I don't know if it's better. It's just the way that's been done for a long time. Displacement is extremely popular, extremely efficient, and extremely quiet. It does require more planning on the architect's side, because we are taking up square footage, and it does take some more planning and expertise on the HVAC side. It's been done for a long time in auditoriums and schools and places where there's people sitting for a while that generate their own body heat. That cold, slow moving air finds that heat source and rises and cools it that way. They used it, they've been using it for decades. If you guys remember the big sick building syndrome that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, this is one to keep that individual column air to your column of air. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop someone sitting next to me and coughing on me. That velocity is just not high enough to take care of that, to create an air barrier for yourself. But it's just a general good practice for a healthier style building. But it is more expensive to install. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Well, unless we put everybody in their own little tube or bubble or something like that, I don't think we'd be able to battle common courtesy. So let's see. Let's hold on to the next one. All right, back here. Let's see. Do you see more interest in low voltage cabling or seat occupancy sensors to facilitate social distancing? Are we looking at, I know there's a lot of technology now in the seats. Are people making use of that, and are they doing it in response to COVID-19? Let's see. Domenico, start with you.
I think a lot of operators are frozen. They're kind of like watching what's going to happen next before they take steps. I mean, these are nice haves, but it then adds an operational aspect to it to say, like, how are you going to police that? How are you going to manage that to ensure that that's actually done? And that throws it back into an ops kind of point of view. So yeah, I mean, it's really valid technology and it's interesting, and it might make people feel comfortable. Well, maybe how we signal that on seats and things like that with a LED or whatever signal that might help people, like a parking spot, say that's your place. But then it throws it into an ops thing, and I don't think we're there. I think people want as much as possible things to return as they were. But we'll see.
Yeah. But generally, it might be just too soon to determine whether or not that's good. Mike Beckley, are you seeing anything on that side?
Well, I'll say, over the past few years, the seating industry seems to be able to adapt quickly to the demands for theaters, whether that's, heaters, obviously the ability to recline, but putting sensors and those types of things in order to make social distancing easier to accomplish. That's here already. Honestly, the technology is there. So depending on how this plays out over the next couple of months, what this pandemic does, I think those things are easy to implement, and I certainly see the seating vendors catching up and providing that.
Okay. So one other topic, on this side is, oh darn it, I just closed my presentation. What about the bathrooms and ticketing systems? Are we going to be seeing more restrooms, or a sea of kiosks out there, and will this affect accessibility? I'm going to jump to you, Mike Cummings.
Yeah, I think you probably will see some changes in that going forward. You know, the ticketing has become you know, app-based and primarily kiosk, you know, as a need may diminish, and we'll likely see some of the gesture technology that I think we've all seen some examples of for the kiosks that look awful interesting. So ticketing may be a whole different experience as we move forward. I think, you know, restrooms, we've been thinking about that a lot. Is like, that's one of the most challenging areas to keep clean or to make people feel comfortable with in a cinema. And, you know, generally when you're in that situation in a restroom, unless you're actually in a stall, there's a very real potential that you're kind of shoulder to shoulder with someone. And
Right.
it's never been a great experience, and it certainly isn't, doesn't promote any kind of social distancing. So I think ideas about maybe changing how people go in and out, you know, to separate in and out kind of traffic, and think about how the fixtures are spaced. And we've even done a kind of an open hand washing area that's kind of as you leave the toilet, that so you can see that people are washing their hands, and you can see again the visibility of it.
And shame them into washing their hands. That's a good idea.
Yeah, shame them, and also possibly people will stop there to wash their hands if they don't have to go to the restroom. So
Right.
I think those are areas that we will definitely see some real thought put into and potentially changes to.
Yeah, Frank, if I could add to, you know, I think
Sure.
what we've seen recently, you know, brighter restrooms, you know, more light in restrooms. You know, it's amazing how, you know, just by providing more light, the bathrooms remarkably stay cleaner. And so I think, you know, in the COVID world, you know, dumping more light in there to make sure that the employees and the exhibitors keep those restrooms clean, I think is going to help. Foot pulls on doors, you know, ways to open doors without using your hands, you know, things like that to allow people to not have to touch as many surfaces. And I think the verdict might be out on hand dryers versus paper towels. You know, those, I never liked those loud hand dryers anyway, but I think paper towels are kind of winning the battle right now. So anything you can do to help make that perception better of a cleaner environment, and allowing people to not touch as many surfaces, I think is what's here to stay. Certainly,
I think that hand dryers end up being more of a, you know, putting moisture in aerosolized form, you know, is certainly going to be a counter to what everybody's seeing right now. They certainly don't want to see that. So anything to add, Marcus, as far as the ticketing and restroom areas and even accessibility changes?
I think agreeing with Mike Beckley, I mean, the bright lights have always helped. I think that you may even see separate entrances and exits, you know, one-way flow through there. And then, you know, possibly, you know, I've always liked this to throw back to the old time with maybe a bathroom attendant in there, making sure, you know, that things are cleaned up. You know, I've always, you know, that's, but, you know, you're going to have to, you know, sacrifice more square footage. That's something that, you know, it's hard to get in every building. And I think probably movement to individual stalls, or what we've seen a lot in the restroom side is just individual unisex restrooms. You know, would be a fantastic deal. That way, that environment is your environment for whatever period of time you happen to be in there. But again, that sacrifices, you know, footprint.
Sure, certainly. Domenico, are we seeing any changes in Europe as far as this goes, or are we still mostly wait and see?
Yeah, I think 100%. I really agree with the point on hand dryers and blow dryers. I mean, unless you've got a filtration system on that, you're just recirculating the air from the environment. So you got to look at your specification on that really carefully, because that's just a means to distribution. Hand towels are the way to go on that basis. Bill, you know, you look at your paper and your ecology on that too. Chicane entrances, definitely. No doors. Gravitational hinges, definitely. Look at electronic versions of dispensers, so non-touch. sensors on taps, no push down, and just try and make it as touchless as possible. Yep, all of those issues, light, quality. We've always said that when we design toilets, it's part of the experience. You're going out for a night, and so we don't want poor toilets. We want toilets which match your night out. It's a place to get ready for your date, so it has to be a good quality environment.
For sure. I think everybody's gotten used to waving their hands in front of their sink, and especially when there's already a handle, presenting themselves to them, and they think, oh, I got to touch this one.
Maybe Alexa will go there at some point as well.
That might be a challenge, unless it's an individual toilet, though. So otherwise, the water's been going on and off everywhere. So, all right. So I think one of the bigger questions that we're going to have is cost implementation or implications, rather, of all of this. We've discussed a lot of changes, and is this going to be a wash? Are we just going to change things around, or are we going to, all of these, even hypotheticals that we've been discussing, even the stuff that we're really focused on doing, is this going to be necessary? Is it just going to, what are we thinking here? Is this going to be a big change? Domenico, I'll start with you.
I would say, actually, talking about my own personal COVID experience, what's going on here in Europe and Italy and around me, I see people. I mean, we were very scary right at the beginning. Italy is a disaster, and it's closing down, and we closed down really tightly, and it's paid a lot of benefits on a public health kind of basis. And people just want to go back to the way things were. There's a natural desire to go back to how things were as much as possible. Yeah, people don't want to have a future where they have to completely change their patterns of behavior. But what it has done is it's highlighted a kind of psychology in people. People will be aware from now on in. It's introduced themes that they weren't aware of before in terms of cleanliness, hygiene, washing your hands, and how they're encountering their environment. And those things will be lasting for us, I think, in terms of designers. We've got to always have them in the forefront of our mind. So I would say, let's see how it pans out. Let's see how it works out. But let's just be really intelligent about how we do it. And at this stage in the game, let's get as much low-hanging fruit as possible that we can to get the opening up again, going again, and then look how we plan out of this.
Yeah. Marcus, what do you think? Do you think, as far as the MVP systems out there, I think they're going to get more expensive as a result of some of the things that we can do to battle the sanitization and so forth within the theaters?
I really don't think there's going to be a dramatic increase in cost. I think that a lot of these technologies exist and are being used in many other arenas in a very cost-effective way. So there's nothing that we're looking at that's something that's brand new. I mean, these technologies are available, and so I don't think there's going to be a large deal. I think they need to pay more attention to the cost of maintenance. But some of the maintenance costs for, let's say, changing out UVC bulbs, I don't think is that drastic. But it gives you benefit on the air system. I mean, if you bathe the coil in that, it's going to keep that coil clean and keep that pressure drop down. So it's going to keep the motors running more efficiently. I mean, you look at just the success they've had in other markets with that. I think it's a good thing. So no, I don't think we're going to see a drastic increase. Just paying a little bit more attention to it.
Okay. Mike?
Yes, I think today there are some costs. Try to buy Clorox wipes right now.
Yeah, right.
But longer term, I think there might be some small incremental costs. I think about the environmental kind of consciousness and LEED or LEED program, and when that started, it cost so much to do a building with that could meet that kind of a requirement, and all the material manufacturers and everybody responded and started thinking about recycled content and how they could more responsibly manufacture their products and gave us options that were essentially in the range of the same cost as the less healthy products we were using before. So I think that will happen again. But thinking about materials that can be cleaned easier and antimicrobial properties and even kind of self-cleaning options like you see with glass and things. I think people will concentrate on them more and we'll get some good solutions to them. The one kind of change that I think we will see is, we might see a reconsideration of how the space is allocated within in one of the theaters. Certain components will warrant more space. We always try to look at putting the space where people appreciate it. Where the customer will appreciate it, as opposed to using the space to meet the necessary basic function. And I think thinking about it from the impact of COVID, we will reconsider how we utilize some spaces. We just talked about bathrooms, we've talked about seating, talk about how people move in and out, how food service works. Those things might take up different sizes of spaces in the facilities of the future.
Okay. So, Mike, you have anything to add to that, Mike Beckley?
Yeah, I think it's a proceed with caution scenario with me. I think we know what these facilities cost, but it's having, I think, a design build mentality and working with our construction partners. Unless budgets change, we're going to have to get these things built. So, I think it's really working early to make sure that we offset costs where we can, whether it's with materials, whether it's the layout of the facilities, whether it's working with MEP systems. But, unless there's a severe change in the industry that allows for these buildings to become less expensive, or unless our clients are getting more money and real estate is getting cheaper, we've got to find a way to work within those budgets, and that's our job, and that's kind of what we set out to do from the beginning, to make sure that we can hit those budgets.
Yeah. So I guess the general thought is that we're kind of a wait and see. Probably the biggest cost would be space if we end up needing it in order to accommodate that distancing, but generally the buildings are probably going to be built very close to the same way. Hopefully we don't have to have our a lot of these sanitizations and distancing things that are coming out right now be a permanent aspect of our lives. Hopefully we can get this under control. So I think we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. Rebecca and Daniel, if you can hear me, is there anything, did we get anything on the questions? Let's see.
Here I am.
There you are.
Hi guys, great seminar, was interesting to listen to. Oh, hey Daniel. So first, Frank, I just wanted to, if we go over to the polls tab here, the general story that we see is that yes, theaters are for the most part going to want to add technology and are going to be budgeting to do that, even if it's not required by law that they do so. Construction projects will look different, and most people who answered this do plan to change their cinema interior layout based on the business effects of COVID. Does this, any surprises here? It matches up with what you expected?
A little bit. I think we had a little bit of a wait and see attitude, and generally from our group. But what do you guys think? That seems like everybody's interested in changing their buildings a little bit, at least their interior layout based on COVID. Yeah. Anybody want to jump in and comment on that?
Well, Frank, this is Mike. I do think we'll see that. I think it's a little bit too early in the process to have a very good idea of what that might be. Mm-hmm. But I think as we move forward to doing new complexes eventually, I think there will be questioning and challenging of what we have been doing, it kind of in almost every aspect. And so I do think it will be different. And if I could predict what that would be, I would be out trying to convince people, but I don't know yet.
And Frank, let me add to that too. I think if there's one thing that we want to make sure is that we learn from this. 6 months ago, I don't think a pandemic was on anybody's mind. No. Even if this were to end tomorrow, I think everybody would want to go back to the old normal as soon as possible. But you don't want to have something else come a month later to put us right back to where we are. So I think taking the lessons of what we're learning now and implementing as many of those as we can in the most efficient and cost-effective way that we can, so that the next time something like this happens, you don't have a situation where everybody has to completely shut down and wait it out. I know that's killing our clients, and anything that we can do now and implement to help with that next time is what we need to do.
It's really interesting.
Well, so I'm gonna just jump this in there, and it's an element of what the changes are, but people are really interested in drive-ins now all of a sudden. And as much as people's vehicles have been a core element of their life, at least on the West Coast. Nobody walks in LA, remember that. So the drive-ins have been slowly going away, and now they're booming, and we're doing little pop-up drive-ins everywhere. And do you all foresee a element of a drive-in in all theaters going forward? And I want to start with Domenico real quick, just because I have no idea in Europe how, if there is such a thing, or if it's just a U.S. thing, or is there a lot of drive-ins? No.
Yeah, I tell you what, we got a request a couple of weeks ago to want to do next to a golf course in Dubai. Yeah, there's definite interest out there for that, but not just drive-in. I think there's interest for open air. So we've been looking at open air cinemas connected to the cinema itself, which gives a fallback position to the operator. So they're up and out, and doing them as nice lounges and the kind of real outside kind of soft evening feel. So it feels good. So if the climate allows it, then outdoor space cinema is good to go. And
Mike, you were going to say?
Well, unfortunately, I can't hear Domenico, but I've spent a lot of time in Italy, and I don't remember seeing any drive-ins. But having said that, the nostalgia around them, here in the States, I think is incredible. I grew up in a small town in Southern Illinois, and that drive-in is still there. We've seen a lot of interest in them, a lot of questions in them. It seems like, everywhere you turn right now, you see some sort of pop-up drive-in happening. I think Walmart's announced 163 some odd stores. They're going to start showing drive-ins in their parking lot. I know Tribeca and others are doing a lot of these installations with pop-up drive-ins. I think depending on how those work during COVID, will dictate how they work moving forward. I know people like to get out of their cars and sit in lawn chairs and watch, and a lot of these have restrictions where you can't. But putting that aside, I think for the movie theaters that we currently have, I think it's really easy in some instances to use the existing parking lots, to use the side of the building as a movie screen, to utilize rooftop space for Movie Under the Stars and things like that, where the infrastructure is already in place. We're coming in with the electrical needs and the other types of FF&E that's required to make this happen is minimal. And that's something that if you implement now, the next time this happens, if it happens, you've already got something in place that can help weather the storm.
Yeah, I think people are certainly remembering the days of the drive-in. I think most of us have experienced it, and it's one of those things where we remember the old days. So do we have any other questions, Rebecca?
We did. It was actually something from David Paolini that's kind of touches on a subject that Domenico was talking about earlier in terms of amenities and going to the cinema as a real experience. David asked, do you think going forward we're going to see almost an economic divide with maybe economically challenged people preferring to stay home and watch from their homes, while the maybe better off people go to the theater more, and as a result, will theaters become maybe more of a luxury experience? Is that going to be more economically viable going forward, kind of catering to that crowd?
Wow. I think there's a really unfortunate answer to this, is that a lot of studies, a lot of number crunching on this, on stats, certainly in Europe, it noticed the difference between disposable income and socialization and where you go with your socialization. So yeah, there is in a lower income bracket a tendency to maybe stay home and maybe use home entertainment and other means than going to social events. But I think maybe you've got to think about cinema as really being that special night out. And if we are creating spaces that are the special night out as a quality environment, if they are back to being dream palaces and not kind of like process cinemas, I think we've got a chance to create something that people of whatever will hopefully be able to access and enjoy.
Mike, do you have a US version of that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, unfortunately, I see that there are some aspects of truth to that with the economic divide and disposable income and people's ability to do that. I think a lot of our, clients have responded with some kind of programs to create a family night or another kind of a discount situation that works fairly well for those. But if the pandemic has taught us anything, is that a big part of the human condition and human experience is that we need to interact and socialize with each other. And that's going to happen somewhere. And you see it happen in kind of scary, unfortunate ways right now in certain situations. And that's a big part of the success of the movie theater and entertainment facilities, is that, we provide a place for people to come together and have a shared social experience. And we need that. We desperately need that. And I mean, I know it's only been 4 or 5 months, but I miss having a drink with Frank in a bar somewhere around the world. And enjoyed this presentation. It's just not the same thing.
That's right.
So exhibitors are very resourceful, bright, and very. They reinvent themselves constantly, and I remain convinced that they will figure out in an entrepreneurial way in their markets how to respond to this and come out of it stronger. And so I'm optimistic about the future. I wish it were sooner than I'm afraid it will be. But I think there is a divide and it's a challenge, and home entertainment is great, and I've done a lot of that in the past few months. And I crave getting out and seeing my friends and doing something more social.
That's right. So, we have any more questions, Rebecca?
We actually do have one if we have time. Is that
Sure,
all right?
yeah, one last question, then we'll get to final thoughts.
We have a question from Mario at JMAR. In terms of seating design inside the lobby, have any of you been seeing anything moving towards maybe clumps of seating geared towards families, geared towards people who have been quarantining together, almost like a beefed up version of the pod seating that we've been seeing over the last couple of years? Box seats, clumps of seats. Is that the sort of thing that you think has legs going forward? To whomever.
Since I got you up there, Mike, you got that?
I think it does. I think there's, even before this happened, we have a mixture of people from different places in our office, and they view going to the movies as or younger folks as a very social experience, and sitting in a row, in a line, all facing the same way is not the most social environment. And so we've developed some schemes for that, and I think there's a place for that. Perhaps it's not in the Hollywood great big tentpole PLF kind of an auditorium, but perhaps it's a space that's a smaller, more flexible, programmable kind of a entertainment focused space. But I do think there's a place for that, and I'm very excited about what that could lead us to.
Yeah. Mike Beckley?
Yeah, I agree. I think, if there's one thing that we've seen in the last few months are people, just eager and really starving for social interaction. I can't walk down the street without seeing neighbors that I haven't seen in a long time sitting even across the street from each other, trying to communicate and share an experience together. I think you will see some of that moving forward. I think lobbies is a great place for that. I think reservation systems, in order to reserve, your own box, if you will, your own pod, in order to share that social experience with your friends and family. I think it's a great idea. I think that's something you certainly will see moving forward.
Any thoughts on that, Marcus?
I echo what they're saying. Yeah, we're some of the theaters around here definitely have some areas for the people to gather together. So I think you'll see that. People don't want to be separated if they went as a group together and they're going to experience that film together. But and I know we keep saying it's about that experience, it's about that social interaction, and we will adapt the theaters to provide that. There's no doubt, because it is an experience to go to the theaters.
For sure. Domenico?
Yeah, I think a lot of these challenges can be addressed also through technology, once again, in booking systems and how you actually program it. I think that's one way of a fast fix to allow that social interaction, that groups to go together. We've also been very much involved in seeing multiple seating pricing structures within cinemas themselves in the one screen, through premium or different seating offers within the same screen. And that allows kind of people of saying, whether it's a young kid that wants to go front row and to get right in there, or whether it's something mid or somebody's really looking for a premium experience, all on the same screen. So there's different differentiations I think are possible too.
For sure. So all right. So I have one final question then, and just to kind of leave you with as we get going. I'm going to start with you, Domenico. Do you think your job is going to be easier or harder now with the implementations of all these things that we're talking about in the post-COVID world?
It's a really big question. I think it's incredibly, actually, from a professional point of view, I love the challenge. I think it's a really interesting challenge that we've got to be able to be balanced in our approach, not rush after one thing. But I think the nature of the business is going to change. I think we've seen people handing in their keys for their cinemas. There's going to be a cleaning out of the marketplace, and there's going to be repurposing, and people are going to have to think agile in the way they approach things. And whether that's from the real estate agents or the exhibitors themselves or the designers, I think it's a very fluid situation, which requires agility.
Sure. Mike Beckley, easier or harder going forward?
Well,
your job.
Certainly optimistic about it. I think there's definitely its challenges that are coming down, but I think it's exciting. I think anytime that we can try to help solve some of these problems with design, it just reinvents something that that might already be good, but gives us an opportunity to make it better. So I'm excited about it. I think the challenges are coming, but I think we're all ready to tackle them.
All right. Mike Cummings?
Well,
on that, easier or harder?
Well, probably the direct answer would be maybe harder. But that it's what we're trained to do. All of us here had a lot of time. We've been very invested in this marketplace and how to react to it. And so I'm excited about the challenge as well. Technology allows us to do things we couldn't do when I started doing this on a drawing board. And so we're able to solve things in a different way than we were able to solve them the theater of 40 years ago or 30 years ago or even 5 years ago. And so we have better tools and we have a lot of experience. So it may be harder, but we're in the best position we can be to do that.
All right. Marcus, final thought? Easier or harder going forward?
I think it's just the next evolution of the theater. I don't think it's easier or harder. It's just the next evolution, and utilizing the spaces that we already have and the new spaces that we're going to gain. And that includes the outdoor space. I know that people don't think HVAC too much when you think of an outdoor space or a drive-in theater, but I honestly am extremely excited to see the resurgence of that. That's something that my kids have not experienced, that is part of, I believe, an Americana experience here that's very nostalgic, like Mike Beckley was saying. So I'm excited to see that evolution, but I think it's just the next evolution. I don't think it's going to be extremely hard for us. We'll just adapt with the great architectural teams that we partner with, and the constructors that we partner with, and the end users. I think it's going to be neat to see where we go from here. With every challenge, there's a solution, and we're all going to find it.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate all of your insight into this challenging topic. And I'm going to pass it back on to Rebecca. And then this recording will be put on our website when we're shortly after completion. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks
Great.
so much to Frank, to the ITCA, to all the panelists, and to Beth, who helped put this together, even though she wasn't able to participate today. Yeah, the recording of this panel will go to the email address at which you registered. And thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate having you here. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.